Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you, thank you so much for being here. So my topic today is faith, partnership with God. And I came up with this topic because a few weeks ago, I was listening to radio, the Christian radio, and they were talking about a point that I thought was kind of interesting. They said that often they notice or they feel that it's easier to have faith in God when it comes to our beliefs, but it's a lot harder to have faith in God when it comes to our decisions or our actual day-to-day decisions in our life or day-to-day challenges that we go through, day-to-day activities. And I thought, that's really true, because I know a lot of people who say, I believe in God or I believe in such and such, but that's about as far as it goes. It doesn't actually touch other areas of their life, which I thought, what's the point? What's the point there in that kind of a faith? But I do understand too how it gets to that point, because I've also experienced that in my own life. Kind of a feeling that, well, I know that there's God, but I'm not sure about anything else. So I think that many people feel that way these days because of kind of the state of religion, unfortunately, and what we see in society in general. So it's definitely not condemnation, but just kind of, I think, the reality of things. But it does still really force us to ask a question, like, what value does faith have if it doesn't actually influence the way we live our life? If it doesn't actually have it make a difference in how we make decisions or how we overcome challenges or deal with difficult circumstances in our life, or affects our way of thinking about the future, goals in life, things that we'd like to see accomplished. The way I see faith, it should affect our life on a deep level. Like, it should affect how we relate to people. It should affect how we think. It should affect the goals we make in life. It should affect what we do if somebody hurts us or cuts us off or slanders us in some way. We've talked in the past about the fruits of the Spirit, which is a really great conversation around, if we really live a genuine life of faith, how should that manifest in our life, in our day-to-day activities, and the way we relate to people, the way we relate to our children, our parents, our family members, these kind of things. Because at the end of the day, actions speak louder than words, especially to those people who are, closest to us, like our family members. The reality is that many people maybe won't say this out loud, but internally we think, I believe in God, I want to have faith in God, but I want God to stay out of my business. Can you relate maybe? So I felt that way at times. Like, well, I want to believe in God, but I really don't want God to change any of my plans. I don't really want God to put me in an uncomfortable position where I may have to change something about my character or the way I relate with people or the way I live my life or maybe my goals in my life. I think there's a part of us that really has a hard time to actually let go and trust God with the things that are really important to us. Control. We don't want to actually give God control. We want control for ourselves and a general faith that there is a God and God loves me and these kind of things. And I think that in and of itself runs into limitations very quickly, because I don't believe that a real sincere faith or sincere relationship with God works like that. Just like our relationships with the people in our lives don't work like that. If somebody is important to you, you can't just acknowledge their existence and then move on with your life, right? Your destinies become intertwined with each other. Your actions influence and have consequences on their life, and their actions have consequences, influence on your life. That's what it means to be in relationship with another person. And I think that, especially in today's time, this age that we live in, this idea of a faith that's simply a matter of a belief system or like something that we just inherited is more and more unappealing to people, more and more unappealing like to our children. That's something that they would want to inherit in their life. I think that what people are looking for is a faith or a belief that changes people's lives. But even devout religious people, even people who maybe been coming to church for, 50 years or, do all the things, we can get caught up in this way of thinking that I can do the traditions, I can do the actions, but not actually be giving God any real handle on my life, not really be giving God any control or any say on how and why I do things. But I believe that a sincere and honest life of faith where we actually live in partnership with God is one of the most precious things that we can have in our life. If we really believe that God is our loving parent, then it's natural that we would want God to be in our life. It's natural that we would want God to intervene if we're maybe not going the right direction, to correct us, to adjust our way of thinking, because ultimately God wants us to find fulfillment in life through doing things that are fulfilling and meaningful to us and to Him. So here's a couple quotes I have prepared. The first one's from Reverend Moon. He said, "When God looked upon His entire universe, He loved it with infinite love. And so it is with infinite love that God loves the people of the world today. God has endured 6,000 biblical years and still loves you this way. God's love toward all these things is infinite and limitless." This is from Proverbs. "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline and don't be upset when He corrects you, for the Lord corrects those He loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom He delights." I think that sometimes we get really caught up in the circumstances of life and the reality that we've experienced maybe growing up or in our personal lives that kind of I think a lot of people really struggle with this concept because maybe we've experienced in our own life somebody, a parent, a close friend, a role model that really tried practicing faith in a way that maybe we felt we suffered because of it. Or maybe we didn't like the results that we saw in that person's life, so I don't want to do what they did. I don't want to have those same results in my life. Or maybe for ourselves, maybe we have experience where we tried being very faithful, but looking back on things and looking at our life today, maybe it's hard to feel good about the results. Maybe it's hard for me to feel gratitude or like grateful that I tried practicing the faith that I did over all the years, and I don't like the results that I see. So I think there's many reasons why this can be a really challenging topic for a lot of people. But the reality is that I've never met anybody who has had an easy life. I've never met anybody that has had like this smooth life that just never, they had a desire, everything went smoothly, the desire was fulfilled, and then they lived happily ever after. But unfortunately, this is kind of the way we kind of are conditioned to look at life. We want to find that perfect transition from point A to point B, and then life is good and then it's over, something like that. I've never met anyone that's happened to, but if you have, let me know. They might be out there. I'm not saying it's impossible, I just have never experienced that myself or met anyone who's had that kind of a life. Yeah, the reality is that there's no guaranteed results in life. And it makes me think about people that I hold near and dear to my heart like Jesus, to think about how Jesus must have felt when he was dying on the cross, hanging there, bleeding, for his life that he dedicated to God, and he offered on behalf of all humankind. I wonder, if Jesus thought about how did it come to this? And I think about how our true father, Reverend Moon, must have felt when he was sent to a death camp, basically to be worked to death and starve and die for doing nothing wrong. And then later in his life, coming to America and being sent to prison as a 64-year-old adult, again for having done nothing wrong. I think it's easy to forget that a life of faith isn't like the same as a life of ease and comfort. In a way, when we choose a life of faith, when we choose God, when we choose this way, in a way, we're kind of accepting that there's going to be some challenges. In a way, it's kind of like standing up in front of God and saying, let me do something for you, or let me do something. I think everybody's situation may look a little bit different, but I think everybody here has probably had this experience where they, in a moment in life of really connecting to the heart of God or connecting to our own sinfulness or iniquities or shortcomings, we really come to a place of humility before God, asking, what can I do? Or something like, I can't do this by myself. I need you. And it's also in some way of saying, like, my life up until this point has not led me to a place I feel good about. I'm willing to let go of something. I'm willing to sacrifice something. I'm willing to endure something so I can live a bigger life. So I can live my life with you, God. And to ask God to use us for something, that's not asking for an easy life. Many people look for an easy life, a life without challenges, a life without difficulties, a life where we control the outcome, the life where we decide how things end up. Such a life doesn't exist. I mean, I'm not saying that we don't have any control over our decisions. We definitely do. But we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know if the world is going to, the world can go to hell tomorrow. It'd be another disease, or, we might get some unexpected news. How many times has it happened to people? We go on in life and it's like, the person died in an accident. Oh, the person has an incurable disease. Oh, something crazy happened. And we have no guarantees for tomorrow or the next day or the next day. And as much as we can have some degree of control over our life, I think it's also important to recognize that life also happens to us as well. I think the important thing here is that even though there is always going to be challenges in life, we don't want to get stuck in those challenges, right? We want to go through those challenges, overcome them, and come to a greater place in life, not get stuck in the challenges, because sometimes we just get stuck, and we can spend years in place of darkness and winter. So here's a nice quote from our founder. He said, "As a year consists of 4 seasons, in your life there is a spring-like period in which you receive blessing, a summer-like period in which the blessing grows, an autumn-like period in which you bear the fruit of the blessing, and then a winter-like period of trial. Therefore, be grateful for trials. They come from the love of God to separate us from Satan. If you endure and overcome them, a spring-like period of new blessing will follow. So it's only because, Jesus overcame the cross that we could receive grace through Jesus' sacrifice. It's only because True Father suffered through the challenges that he had to deal with and overcame them that we could stand here today as Unification Church. It's the same with all people who've lived in the past, who endured things that weren't fair, that went through things that they didn't deserve, that sacrificed and tried to live a good life, that we could stand here today and be here and live the kind of life that we can live. We work and we try to make the best decisions in our life, but we can't deny that we come based on the foundation that we didn't have any say in. And many of our ancestors and saints and good people in the past made many sacrifices so that we could live the way we do today, even though, granted, there's many flaws in that as well. Every day we benefit from the goodness of people in the past, and we suffer the consequences of the mistakes and injustices of the people of the past as well. A little bit of both. So we have to try our best to be people of faith and put into practice what we can today to be those people for the future. Compared to the people I'm talking about, saints of the past, people like Jesus and Reverend Moon, Mrs. Moon, I give, to be honest, our own lives sometimes seem very small. And, I don't know if I am a person who would be willing to lay my life down for humanity, But I think that there are certain special people in the world who are called to make big sacrifices, and they lay a foundation for us so that we can inherit those sacrifices, that foundation, and be able to live a much more, I think, natural or kind of more a life, kind of what God originally intended for his children to live. I don't think God expects us to have to go to jail or to go on a cross or to die for others. But I do think that God still has needs, and that there's still a lot of problems in the world, and God is a loving parent. And so we as his children, we don't get a pass to any kind of discomfort or any kind of difficulties. There's still needs, and there's still ways in which we can fulfill those needs for God. We should do what we can, I guess is the point. We should do what we can in our own lives, what we feel called to do. So, for Adonia and I, one of our hopes in coming here to Colorado was to really build a thriving community. And as we saw our children getting older, we thought, we really want our kids to experience community. We want them to have good friends, not just good friends. I mean, you can find good friends anywhere, but like friends of faith, people that they can really walk hand in hand with and support and encourage each other and really strive to become godly people together. That's our dream. It's a small dream in a lot of ways, but last week, Mia was having her 11th birthday party. I got kids mixed up there for a second. And it was really beautiful. All the girls that were there together, and I just thought in my head, oh my gosh, when we first moved here, only one of these girls was here when we first moved here. All the other girls, it was like 8 girls or something like that, came since then. And it's been such a affirming experience to see the dream that we set out to create, even though it's, I accept that it's a small dream, but even that, to see it coming to reality, to think that God might care about our small dream, is really affirming and encouraging, and it's really beautiful to see. And, but still, we're just getting started in a lot of ways. But it's beautiful to see a step in the right direction. I think that practicing a real life of faith and experiencing God working in our lives is so important, because it's easy to look at things in the world. We look at all the things that are happening in the world. Aren't we so lucky today? We have social media and the internet. We know all the terrible things that are happening in the world instantly. There's no delay, Isn't that stressful? Don't you wish sometimes that you were like, I think that's why some people, there are people who don't have any internet or, social media and things like that, but it's hard to do these days. But sometimes I feel jealous of the people of the past who had, you would hear about something happening like months after it happened by messenger or something like that, like a horse rider or something. Or word of mouth, from village to village, you hear, oh, did you hear there was a terrible earthquake? I mean, these things have always been happening, right? Terrible things have always been happening in history, but we're like bombarded by it. I mean, one bad thing happens in, Mongolia, and you hear about it. One bad thing happens in the North Pole, we'll hear about it, right? So that is life today, and it's easy to think, when we hear all the bad things all the time and things that maybe we feel very, are against God's will and the direction that God has been going in the world, that we feel like kind of hopeless or kind of like, where is God in all of this? Does God even exist? Or if he does he even care? I'm sure that many people in history have felt this way. I mean, this isn't the first time in history that bad stuff has happened. And I'm sure that all throughout time, people have questioned the same question. Does God care? Does God exist? But when we look in hindsight, and this is one of the things I love about the principle, and especially this section on parallels of history, and how it takes us back through not just the Old Testament and New Testament, but also through the last 2,000 years of history, and shows us, the parallels and how God is working and how God is, working to, keep tradition and divide people and bring people back together and work through people and circumstances and countries and ideologies to eventually bring his original kingdom. We're lucky that we can look back on that and recognize, oh, God is working. That's very comforting. That must mean that God's still working today, even though it may not be so obvious. But we should be experiencing God working in our own life too. Otherwise, how will we have confidence that God is working in the world if we don't even see him working in my own life? If God cares about my life and works in my life, then God, of course, cares about the greater world and things that are happening around us. So, but hindsight is 20/20. But I would hope that even in our own lives, we can look back and we can see, maybe even during the dark times, even during the times where we questioned that God was there, and we can see, oh, actually, yeah, I can see God was working. God prepared me for this. God prepared me for that. God prepared me that I could be here today and be the person that I am. I remember a few years back, and we were, every year we try to think, what do we want to accomplish? What do we want to focus on? And I remember, the one year we really recognizing that we really need more focus on our youth ministry. And we kind of made it a goal that we would find a youth pastor. And then we found Anissa, and she's done such a great job. And we had, I think the following year, we had a goal that we wanted to start a CARP chapter in Denver, and we wanted to start a music ministry, because you remember for a while we were just karaoke singing to videos off of YouTube. I'm just really humbled when I look back on those goals that we had and to see how God provided Chelsea and Yoshi and Elisa and John and these guys all can't come together. Of course, Linako was kind of the original one, God bless her. And to come together to help us to fulfill these desires that we had. And it wasn't easy, and it didn't go the way that we thought it was going to go, but the results speak for themselves. And for me, it's humbling to think that, wow, not only does God care about these small goals that we have for our small little community here in Denver, but God actually was preparing to fulfill these desires even before we knew we had them. I mean, if that's not apparent, I don't know what is. Don't we as parents also wish to prepare well for our children's future? Don't we as parents want to prepare the best situation for our kids as they grow up? And, isn't that why people set aside money for college and try to prepare? Like, it's amazing when people are getting ready to have kids, right? Especially the first kid. Maybe not so much after that. But, you paint the bedroom and you buy the nice furniture. And some people really go all out, some people not so much. But, really trying to prepare the best way, and how much more is God like a parent to us? When he sees that his children have a desire to do something good, he wants to help prepare the way. He wants to help prepare the pieces so that once we have realized what we want to do, that we can be successful. I mean, isn't that what we learn about in the divine principle with Jesus? How God, the whole period of time from the fall of Adam and Eve was a preparation so that when Jesus came, he could be successful. That he'd have all the pieces in place so that he could be accepted and could build the kingdom. And even though that didn't necessarily work out, God nonetheless prepared the way. He prepared those things. So, if we really believe that God cares about us, and the Bible tells us he does, and the divine principle tells us he does, then we also have to accept that God is also preparing the way for us as well. So, what does a healthy faith look like today? To be honest, I'm still figuring this out. To be honest, I have moments and times of real conviction. I'm like, yes, everything is really going well, and I see God. And then I have moments where I'm like, this was a big mistake. Not like pastoring, but like, whatever that decision was, or whatever that goal or that hope was. But I do think that it's somewhere in the middle of like an absolute obedience kind of faith that I know is kind of more like Old Testament time and wilderness period of time, like in our own church. And also somewhere in the middle of that and doing everything ourselves. It's somewhere in the middle. I'm going to call it a partnership faith. I think that what God is looking for from us is a partnership of faith with him. Because at the end of the day, we need God, and God needs us. So this is from the divine principle. From the time of creation, God predestined that his will be accomplished based on the combined fulfillment of God's portion of responsibility and the human portion of responsibility. And this is from Mark. And Jesus answered them, "Have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, 'Be taken up and thrown into the sea,' and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore I tell you, whenever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." So the thing I like about this quote is, this verse, is that it doesn't specifically say this, but it kind of implies a mindset or an action that if you actually prayed for something and you believe that God heard your prayer and that it was a sincere prayer and that God will answer your prayer, then won't you act as if God were going to answer your prayer, right? So I think that, Jesus is saying two things here. And as usual, he's not just saying, well, have faith and it'll just happen. Jesus is also saying, you have to believe that what he says will come to pass. And believe that you have received it. And real belief implies action. Like if you pray for something and you believe it's going to happen, then you're going to live your life as if you're expecting that prayer to come true at some point. And it's been an interesting kind of journey for us since the beginning of the year. I talked a little bit about the things that we kind of set as goals for the beginning of the year, this year, a couple weeks ago. And, we decided that we wanted to find a new parsonage, and we decided that we wanted to find a new YAMI coordinator, or a YAMI coordinator, because we haven't had one. Anissa has been filling in, and the rest of us have been helping as best as possible. And we wanted to get those exterior renovations done. And some things we can do, like we can look for a house. You get on Zillow and you start looking at houses, and you find a real estate agent and all these things. But some things are not really in our hands. The right house at the right time, but we try to do what we can to prepare. So if we're planning to move out of the parsonage, then I decided, well, let's start fixing it up, because we're going to have like 10 or 12 single people living in there. We need to change a bunch of things around. It's very different than having a family or two families living in there. So let's fix up the things that need to be fixed up, prepare for a bunch of single people to be living in there, clean the carpets, like all these things. If we really believe that God is going to help provide a way for this goal, then we shouldn't wait around till we have positive proof that it's going to happen. We should start acting as if it is going to happen. Otherwise, how can we say that we have any real faith or belief that it's going to happen? So it's been kind of fun over there. We've been, fixing some things and doing a bunch of different stuff, adding some new lighting in, and it's kind of an exciting process for us to wonder how is God going to help us, or how is God going to lead us maybe in a slightly different direction? We don't know how things are going to pan out, and we've been knocking on the doors of the houses, that aren't for sale, looking up the owners, calling the owners, hey, is your house for sale? Getting lots of no's, no, my house isn't for sale, these kind of things. And, we've been asking and looking around for a new YAMI coordinator, and I've got some ideas of how we can try to find one. But, based on my past experience, somehow I'm not really that stressed out about it. I know the right person will come at the right time. And we need to do our part. Maybe we're not ready. Maybe we need to get ready. Maybe we need to, I told Peggy like a few weeks ago, I was like, Peggy, if the right house comes along, we're not ready to buy it. We don't have enough cash and we don't have a loan set up. And we were like, oh, we need to get on that. So I realized, like, even if God put a house right in front of us, we wouldn't be in a position to buy it. So that was like an obvious red flag, like, oh, we need to figure that out. And actually, we have something in the works right now, but there's a possibility it might just fall through completely. So I don't really want to talk about it publicly yet, but maybe in a couple weeks. Huh? I know, well, yeah, but I'm not, anyway, I'm just saying that there's a possibility, but I don't want to get my hopes up too high or anyone else's, but it was a really cool experience, and there's a possibility we may be able to buy a house literally right over here. Yeah, but I left out some important details, right? Anyway, whatever. Anyway, I'm really hopeful about it. Well, so anyway, I already talked. So last week, 2 weeks ago, Adonia and I decided to knock on the door of this house right on the edge of Irving and 14th. So basically the opposite side of the fourplex here, the opposite end. Oh, you know her? Okay. Yeah. So we decided to knock on the door and be like, hey, this was like a last-ditch effort. We were like, well, if this house says no, all the other houses have already said no. We just need to start looking somewhere else, or we need to adjust our plans. So we knock on the door, nobody answers. We walk around the side, and there's a lady there cleaning, sweeping, and we're like, oh, hey, maybe it was her. And we talked to her. She doesn't speak any English, of course. And so we're trying to use Google Translate to try to explain that we're looking to see if the owner wants to sell. And she's just like, I don't speak English, no hablas inglés. And then up walks the little schoolgirl that lives there. And she's like, oh, can I help you? And we're like, yeah, we're trying to find, get in touch with the owner. And she's like, well, I speak English, basically she speaks English, but she doesn't know who the owner is. And she's like, well, my grandpa will be here in a few minutes. And I was like, well, when's that going to be? A few minutes, 30. Anyway, he's walking up literally as we're talking. Everybody's walking up as we're there. The grandpa doesn't speak any English and he doesn't know. But then the aunt or somebody walks up as well. There could possibly be a lot of people living in this house. And she knows everything. She's like, oh, they already told us we need to move out by the end of May. And, they've been living there for 14 years, so that's kind of sad. But the owners passed away. They were an elderly couple, and I guess the daughter didn't want to hold on to the house anymore, decided to sell it. But it's not on the market or anything yet. So they gave us the number for the property manager. We called the property manager. She was like, oh yeah, call the real estate guy. And we called the real estate guy, and he picked up, and he's like, oh yeah, they're planning to sell the house. Let's talk. So we've got our real estate person talking with him, and all happened in like a 15-minute window of time that we just happened to be there, and all those people happened to be there. It was just a really, really cool experience. And the house fits all the checks. And if we can get it, it would be really wonderful. And not surprisingly, out of all the houses on that block, that house looks like it hasn't had any work done on it since it was built 100 years ago. So I have been really struggling to embrace what seems to be my new lot in life, which is to fix up houses. This has really been hard for me because in my mind, this is not what I signed up for. I didn't think that when I became a pastor that I would be like renovating buildings. Like just never occurred to me. I've always been kind of handy, but like changing brakes and oil in my car kind of stuff, but not like, gutting walls and plumbing and flooring and insulation and all this stuff. And that house will need it all. I'm sure of it. But maybe it's just a blessing, and maybe I shouldn't stress about it so much. And, yeah, thank you, David. David and I are on the same wavelength. I'm sure he's gone through it many times as well. But it is a blessing. And as much as I've thought about, what are maybe some better options? Is this really the way we want to go? A part of me really loves the idea of taking something that's been kind of left to decay or not be cared for, and giving new life to it and recreating it with a new purpose. I think that's the beautiful thing about the fourplex. And when I think back to the early days of our church, that's often what we did too, right? We would buy houses that nobody wanted, that were a dump, and fix them up, and they would become the new headquarters for the church. Or, when we bought the New Yorker, it was run down. And it was like hundreds of volunteers in there fixing it up, right? So that's, I think I'm running over time here, but I'm almost finished. I wasn't planning to share that. Anyway, I'm really hopeful that this can work out, and we'll see. Pray for us, yeah, and pray for Peggy. She's desperately trying to figure out a way to get us a loan because, the banks are having a hard time wanting to give us one. So, go figure. But I think we'll find a way. We'll find a way. So, when we work with God in this kind of a partnership, it's a very humbling experience, because things never really work out the way we want them to work out. But God has a way of helping us to find something bigger and better and greater than we originally envisioned for ourselves. God has a greater mind and a heart and sees the world from a different lens than we do. And in a way, that's kind of comforting. Maybe in order to accomplish the things that we want to accomplish in our life, I have to grow as a person. I have to grow in my capacity to love other people or to handle difficult circumstances in my life. And God knows that. We don't know that, but God knows that. So I think that we, as his children, share our desires and our hopes with God. And we try our best to align our hopes with what's important to God. And then if we can find that kind of a balance, then I think that is partnership with God. That is a life of faith that I personally feel very inspired about. So this is a quote from Reverend Moon's autobiography. He said, "Think carefully about your choice of goals and where you intend to plant them. Depending on the goal you choose and where you plant it, you can become a jujube tree in Seoul, or an apple tree in Africa, or you can become a palm tree in the South Pacific. The goal you plant will bear fruit in the future. Think carefully where the best place is to plant your goal so that it will bear the best fruit." Another thing I like about this, it's not implicitly said, but we don't all have to plant the same tree. And we don't all have to plant the same tree in the same place. So it's just a matter of planting a tree, which kind of represents our life effort, our life investment into something that will bear fruit. So faith by obedience or faith through belief is good, but I think that God is looking today more for partnership. We can't expect to control God, but I think that if we can find a sincere desire to do something for God that is meaningful to God and aligns with our own personal life goals, then we can find a place to practice a real sincere faith and partnership with God. So to finish, I have one last quote. God always takes the position of subject partner to those who dedicate their lives for a public purpose with a loyal heart. Thus, when we struggle and shed tears, God, as our subject partner, struggles and sheds tears more than we do. When we walk a public path with a burning heart of love, we stimulate God, who is the subject partner and center of love, and he always comes to us as our partner. God is also the subject partner who, as a source of energy, provides us the energy to achieve these purposes. In this world, it is hard to find a partner with whom to work in order to fulfill the purpose of love. How happy we would be if God were our partner. Please join me in prayer. Good morning. Dearest Heavenly Parent, thank you so much for the opportunity for us to all come together and for this message. I hope and pray, Heavenly Parent, that it could have been meaningful to somebody, maybe answered a question, tugging at somebody's heart. And Heavenly Parent, please help each and every one of us to live a more full and sincere life of faith, Heavenly Parent. I think, all deeply desire to live a life in partnership with you and to really see you working in our lives and to know that our lives matter to you. And even though sometimes we doubt it or we become discouraged, Heavenly Parent, please help us to find hope. Please help us to digest the difficult experiences of the past, the painful experiences, maybe, Heavenly Parent, that we experienced because people practiced faith in a way that wasn't what you wanted to see in this world, Heavenly Parent. Please give us the strength and the patience to be faithful and to trust in you and to make a real relationship with you that not only impacts us in our lives, but is visible in this world, Heavenly Parent, something that people want for themselves to see in their own life, Heavenly Parent. Because I really believe that even people who maybe doubt you, deep inside they want to see the real you in their life, Heavenly Parent. And I just thank you for all the ways in which you have worked in our lives and in this world that we don't see and that don't always appreciate, but we thank you for what we can. And I offer this prayer in our names, this blessed Central Families. Amen and adieu. Thank you.